Hello everyone, my name is Tibor Gruhl. I'm a professor of ancient history at the University of Pécs. In this video, I'm going to introduce you to the world of first-century synagogues in Judea. As a matter of fact, we have very little information about the synagogues in the period preceding the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem in 70 AD, which is called Churban in Hebrew. In addition to being mentioned in the New Testament, only half a dozen pre-70 or pre-Churban synagogues have been found in modern-day Israel. One of the most important documents on first-century synagogues in Judea is the so-called Thought-provoking inscription. It was found by the French archaeologist Raymond Weil on the southern slopes of the Temple Mount, the so-called Ophel, in 1914. The inscription was not found in situ, but in a cistern in a pile of other building materials. This limestone slab was the dedicatory inscription of a synagogue in Jerusalem, written in Greek. Its text has been published in many epigraphic corpuses, including Supplementum Epigraphicum Graecum, Corpus Inscriptionum Judaeae Palestinae, or the good old Corpus Inscriptionum Judaicarum. The inscription contains 10 lines of text written in Koine Greek. The stone was severely damaged, so the text had to be completed in some places. Notwithstanding, completion of the text is not too difficult. And you can see here on this slide the diplomatic transcription of the text. For better understanding, I divided the text into 4 sections. The first section tells us who made what. That is, the name, the function, and the object that he produced. The predicate of the section is okodomese, that is, built, which is in aoristos. The name of the builder is Theodotos, son of Vettenus. This Theodotos was certainly a freeborn man and not a freedman. The name Vettenus is originated in Italy, hence we can assume that Theodotos or his father moved from Italy to his homeland Judea. As regards his functions, we are informed that he was a priest and head of the synagogue at the same time. Jewish priests played a key role not only in the Jerusalem temple, but in pre- and post-Churban synagogues as well. The second section is crucially important because it tells us what the synagogues were used for in the period before the destruction of the temple. The text is most explicit on this issue. Eis anagnosin nomu. Anagnosis, as you see on the slide, which means reading. Nomos means law. Eis anagnosin nomu means reading of the law. And eis didachen entolon. Didache means teaching, and entole means commandment. So eis didachen entolon means for the teaching of the commandments. This is in accordance with the words of the New Testament. I quote, "For the law of Moses has been preached in every city from the earliest times and is read in the synagogues on every Shabbat." I quoted it from the Acts of Apostles, chapter 15, verse 21. Section 3 is also interesting because it refers to the parts of the synagogue building constructed by Theodotos. The word xenon means house to receive strangers in classical Greek. In classical Greek, this is rather xenodochion. The doma literally means housetop or roof. Some researchers say that it directly refers to the Feast of Tabernacles or the Sukkot, during which Jews must have dwelled in booths or canopies. In such a great city as Jerusalem, the most comfortable place for the booths was the roof. You will see it on the next slide. The next phrase, kresterion, was derived from the chraomai, that is, to use, so it means something like utensil or installation. Researchers call our attention that the water installation cannot be other than the ritual bath or mikveh. The last sentence refers to pilgrims who come to Jerusalem from abroad. Just like today, you can see in this picture that the sukkot, or tabernacles, are built on the roof of a yeshiva in Jerusalem. The fourth section highlights other persons who laid the foundation of the synagogue. The word fathers does not necessarily refer to any biological father of Theodotus, more likely the so-called fathers of the synagogue, or patres synagogae, which was an honorary title for those who financially supported the synagogue community. The presbyteroi, or the elders, formed the spiritual leadership of the synagogue. Sadly, we do not know anything about Simonides. Now we can see the translation of the whole text. Theodotus, son of Vettenus, a priest and an archysynagogos, son of an archysynagogos, grandson of an archysynagogos, built the synagogue for the reading of the Torah and for teaching the commandments. Furthermore, the hostel and the rooms and the water installation for lodging needy strangers. Its foundation stone was laid by his ancestors, the elders, and Simonides. First-century synagogues are very rare in modern-day Israel. We are aware of only 7 synagogues from the era before the destruction of the Temple of Jerusalem. In the following slide, I am going to show you the geographical dispersion of these synagogues, and I try to show you many of them. Let's start with Gamla. Probably the earliest synagogue is Gamla in the Golan, a fortress hidden among the hills of the Golan Heights. Gamla was captured by the Romans after a long and bloody siege in 67. The synagogue at Gamla is thought to date from the late 1st century BC and is among the oldest synagogues in the world. Measuring 22 by 17 meters, its main hall was surrounded by a Doric colonnade. Its corner columns were heart-shaped, and the entrance was provided by twin doors at its southwest. A ritual bath was unearthed next to it. On the eve of Gamla's destruction, the synagogue appears to have been converted into a dwelling for refugees, as testified by a number of meager fireplaces and large quantities of cookpots and storage jars found along its northern wall. Situated next to the city wall, 157 ballista stones were collected from the synagogue's hall alone. Masada was the last fortress of the Jewish rebels, which was captured in the spring of 73 AD. Archaeologists found a small synagogue at Masada faced northward towards Jerusalem. Bleachers were lined along the inside walls. 2 scroll fragments were found under its floor. Also found in the synagogue was an ostracon referring to tithes given to the priests. The 15 by 10 meter hall at Herodium, which apparently functioned earlier as a triclinium or dining room in Herod's fortress palace, was apparently used by the revolutionaries as a synagogue during the first revolt against Rome. 6 columns and several rows of benches were introduced into this rectangular hall. As at Masada, its plaster walls were simple and unornamented. In the course of building the modern town of Kiryat Sefer near Modin, an ancient village was discovered in 1995. A small public building measuring 10 meters on each side was found there. The columns and the pilasters created 2 rows along the length of the building that supported arches, originally surmounted by a wooden structure that in turn supported the roofing. Fragments of red-painted plaster provide the entrance that the walls were painted. In the western wall of the building there was an entrance to a small plastered room, probably used for storing the ritual objects of the synagogue. During excavations undertaken in 2000 and 2001, a square building was discovered at Kirbet Modin in Samaria. The building, in all probability a synagogue, was constructed at the time of Herod. The layout of the synagogue structure is similar to Second Temple period synagogues, such as those discovered at Masada, Herodium, and Gamla. And now let's see what we know about first-century synagogues. Their most important parts are the following: the bima, or an elevated platform, the benches all around the room's walls, the ark, or in Greek kibotos, chest for the Torah scrolls, and the Beit HaMidrash, which means study hall. The most obvious difference between the pre-Urban and late antique synagogues is the absence of a fixed Torah ark. That's a very important issue, because for a long time researchers couldn't imagine where the Torah scrolls were kept in the first century synagogues. One possible solution was a mobile Torah ark, which was depicted among the ornaments of the late antique synagogue at Capernaum. And now we can turn to the latest discoveries. The historic synagogue of Magdala was discovered in 2009 during a salvage dig conducted by the Israel Antiquities Authority. Magdala was a fishing town that was mentioned in Jewish documents of the period as a major site during the First Jewish-Roman War, and is also mentioned in the New Testament as the home community of Mary Magdalene. The synagogue covers approximately 120 square meters. As in other ancient synagogues, it has stone benches built against the walls. The walls were decorated with elaborately designed and colored frescoes, and the floor is partially made of mosaics. But the most exciting and unique find was the so-called Magdala stone, a carved stone table which shows a 7-branched menorah flanked by a pair of 2-handled jocks and a pair of columns. The obvious question is, what might have been the function of this stone, which lay almost in the center of the synagogue? I think the right answer was given by Mordechai Aviam, professor of the Kinneret College, an expert of archaeology of Galilee. He observed that at the 4 corners of the upper side of the Magdala stone, there are 4 rounded flat areas which served as a base for 4 columns. On these columns there was a stone table, a bima, on which the Torah scrolls were placed. The discovery of the Magdala synagogue, and especially the Magdala stone, proved to be a landmark event in the research of first-century synagogues. Now, the relatively recent excavations at Horvat Kur in the Kinneret region seem to reinforce all those things that we learned from Magdala. First, let us see some basic information about the excavations. It was a broad house-type synagogue, which is 16 meters long and 11 meters wide, built around 420 AD and functioned until the 7th century. At its southern wall, a beautifully finished bima was, like at El Kanatir, At its southern entrance, a stone chair, like at Chorazin, and a stone table has been found, like at Magdala. The synagogue at Horvat Kur is a so-called broadhouse-type synagogue that was built at the site around 450 AD and later renovated at least once in the late 6th or early 7th century before it fell into disuse in the 7th century. Most interestingly, some parts of the synagogue date from before the 5th century. The excavations brought very interesting finds to light: a mosaic, a stone chair, and a stone table. The mosaic contained a menorah and the name of a synagogue benefactor, Eleazar, son of Judan, son of Susu. It soon became clear that the mosaic didn't belong to the excavated Broadhouse synagogue, but goes back to an unknown building predating the synagogue. A peculiar stone seat, similar to the one known from the synagogue of Chorazin, was also found at the synagogue of Horvat Kur. According to Jürgen Zangenberg, one of the leaders of the excavation, this stone seat can be considered the honorary seat of the local community leader and probably identical with the seat of Moses, mentioned both in the New Testament and in Talmudic literature. Although in this synagogue there was an elevated platform, a so-called bima for the reading of the Torah, a decorated stone table closely resembling the one from Magdala was also found. Finally, I would like to ask you some thought-provoking questions which will help you to check what you learned and understood from this short presentation, and perhaps they inspire you to deepen your knowledge about first-century Judaism. What are the most important sources of pre-70 synagogues? What were the most important functions of pre-70 synagogues? What additional function did the Jerusalem synagogues have? What are the most important differences between pre-70 and late antique, 5th or 7th century synagogues? What was the function of the bima and the so-called seat of Moses? Where were the Torah scrolls placed in the pre-70 synagogues? Thank you very much for your attention.